Introduction. A bottle of vinegar destroyed. A $100,000 car. In November 2025, somewhere in Europe, a man drove his brand new Polestar 4 to a garden center. He picked up a few things, including a 5-liter jug of 18% industrial-strength white vinegar. On the way home, the container leaked. 5 liters of concentrated acid poured silently into the trunk. He cleaned what he could see, but the liquid had already seeped below the trunk floor, into the belly of the car where high-voltage wiring, electronic control modules, and brake system components are routed. Within 48 hours, the acid ate through wire insulation, corroded circuit boards, and spread forward toward the driver's seat. Then, while driving down the road, his brakes failed. Completely. In a desperate split-second survival decision, he managed to stop the 2-ton electric SUV by hammering the park button on the steering wheel at a traffic light. The repair estimate from the dealership came back at over $29,000. The car was effectively destroyed. Not by a crash, not by a battery fire, by a leaking bottle of vinegar. Here is the twist that makes this story fascinating. At 5% concentration, that same liquid, the exact same molecule, is one of the most effective odor eliminators ever documented. It is also one of the cheapest substances you can buy at any grocery store on Earth. And it has been protecting human health, preserving food, and sanitizing homes since the Babylonians first started producing it commercially around 5,000 years ago. So how does a $2 bottle of kitchen vinegar outperform products that cost 100 times more? Why does nobody in the automotive industry talk about it? And where exactly is the line between miracle cleaner and catastrophic mistake? Welcome to Oracle Prime. Today, we are going deep into 5,000 years of survival chemistry, the hidden economics of why simple solutions stay invisible, and the precise step-by-step protocol that separates a $2 miracle from a $30,000 disaster. If you love uncovering the kind of practical knowledge that used to be passed down from generation to generation but somehow got lost along the way, subscribe now. Let us get started. Part 1. Why your car trap smells by design. To understand why this ancient liquid works so well, we first need to understand why your car is so incredibly good at holding on to bad smells. And the answer takes us back to a materials revolution that happened in the 1970s and 1980s. Before that era, car interiors were built with mostly natural materials. Wool blend carpeting, cotton headliner fabrics, natural rubber floor mats. These materials had an interesting property from a cleaning perspective. Odor molecules would sit on the surface of natural fibers. They did not penetrate deep into the material. A simple wash with water or a mild acid rinse and the smell was gone. Your grandparents did not need a wall of products at the auto parts store because the materials in their cars cooperated with simple chemistry. But then came the switch. Automakers moved almost entirely to synthetic polymers, nylon carpeting, polyester seat fabrics, polypropylene headliner backing, PVC door panels. The reasons were straightforward. Synthetics were cheaper to produce, lighter in weight, more resistant to wear, and they met the new fire retardancy regulations that came out of the safety reforms of the 1970s. From an engineering standpoint, these were smart decisions. But synthetics introduced an unintended problem. Unlike natural fibers, synthetic polymer chains contain microscopic internal voids and channel structures. When volatile organic compounds, the molecules that carry odors, come into contact with synthetic fabric, they do not just sit on the surface. They migrate into those internal voids and become physically trapped inside the polymer structure itself. That is why you can scrub your car seats until your arms hurt, spray every cleaner on the shelf, and the smell comes back 3 days later when the sun heats the interior. The heat expands the polymer fibers just enough to release those trapped molecules back into the cabin air. Material scientists call this phenomenon odor rebound. It was not designed on purpose. Nobody sat in a boardroom and said, "Let us make cars that stink." But the economic consequences of odor rebound created an entire industry. Part 2. The economics of temporary solutions. The global car air freshener market is currently valued at roughly $2.5 billion and growing at about 4% every year. Walk into any auto parts store and you will see entire aisles of brightly colored bottles, hanging trees, vent clips, and aerosol cans, all promising to eliminate odors. But here is what most of those products actually do. They use heavy fragrance compounds to provide immediate sensory masking. Your nose detects the strong, pleasant scent, and your brain registers the car as clean. But the trapped odor molecules inside the polymer fibers are completely untouched. The fragrance fades within days or weeks, the odor rebound effect kicks in, and the original smell returns. So you go back to the store and buy another bottle. Now, is this a conspiracy? Is there a secret meeting where executives decide to keep you in the dark? No. The reality is more interesting than that, and honestly, more useful to understand. The reason simple, permanent solutions like vinegar stay invisible is purely economic. White distilled vinegar is a generic commodity. Nobody owns a patent on it. No corporation has exclusive rights to sell it. There is no brand margin, no recurring revenue, and no marketing budget. When a product cannot generate profit for anyone in the supply chain, nobody has a financial incentive to advertise it. No company is going to spend millions on a campaign that says, "Stop buying our products and use a $2 bottle of vinegar instead." This pattern shows up everywhere, not just in car care. Think about how many effective, generic solutions in health, home maintenance, and agriculture stay unknown simply because there is no money in promoting them. The lesson here is not that industries are evil. It is that the market rewards products with repeat purchase cycles and punishes permanent one-time fixes. Once you see this incentive structure clearly, you start asking better questions about every product aisle you walk through. Part 3. 5,000 Years of Acetic Acid. So let us talk about what white distilled vinegar actually is and why it works. Vinegar is a 5% solution of acetic acid in water. That is it. The Babylonians were producing it commercially as far back as 5000 BCE, making it from fermented dates, figs, and beer. They used it as a food preservative, a condiment, and a medicine. Hippocrates prescribed it for wound care. Roman soldiers carried a vinegar water drink called posca on military campaigns across Europe. During the Great Plague epidemics in Europe, vinegar was used as a disinfectant, and historical accounts describe groups who survived plague exposure by washing themselves in aromatic vinegar mixtures. This is not folk wisdom. Acetic acid is a legitimate antimicrobial and chemical neutralizer that has been validated repeatedly by modern science. And here is why it is particularly effective against car odors. Odor molecules trapped in your car generally fall into a few chemical families: alkaline compounds from pet waste, urine, and mildew, acidic compounds from smoke and food decomposition, and complex organic volatiles from body oils and off-gassing plastics. When you apply a 5% acetic acid solution to synthetic automotive fabrics, the acid molecules are small enough to penetrate into those same microscopic polymer voids where the odor molecules are hiding. Once inside, the acetic acid reacts with alkaline odor compounds through acid-base neutralization, converting them into neutral, non-volatile salts that have no smell. It disrupts and breaks down many of the complex organic volatiles as well. And because this is a chemical reaction, not a masking effect, the result is permanent. The altered compounds cannot revert back to their original smelly form, regardless of heat or humidity. Multiple real-world tests and the experience of professional cleaners confirm that a 5% vinegar solution can eliminate the majority of common automotive odors, including stale smoke, pet smells, food spills, and mildew, often on the first application. Heavy cigarette smoke that has saturated the interior over months or years may require a second application 24 hours later to reach the deepest layers of foam padding. All of that from a $2 bottle sitting in your kitchen cabinet. Part 4. The Protocol. 6 steps done right. Here is the exact method. Every step matters, and skipping even one can mean the difference between a fresh car and damaged upholstery. Follow this precisely. Step 1. Go to any grocery store and buy a jug of plain white distilled vinegar. Check the label and confirm it reads 5% acidity. This is critical. Do not use apple cider vinegar, balsamic vinegar, or any flavored variety. They contain colored compounds and sugars that will stain light-colored fabrics and potentially attract insects. Step 2. Remove all floor mats from the car and set them outside on a flat surface. Open every door of the vehicle to provide maximum airflow. Ventilation is essential, both for drying speed and for your own comfort while working. Step 3. Pour the undiluted white vinegar into a clean spray bottle. Do not dilute it with water. You need the full 5% concentration to penetrate the polymer structure and reach the trapped odor molecules. Step 4. Apply a thorough, even spray to every fabric surface inside the cabin. Cloth seats, floor carpeting, fabric inserts on door panels, the headliner if it is fabric, and the trunk carpet. You want each surface visibly damp, but not dripping wet. Think morning dew, not a rainstorm. Step 5. This is the most important part. Do nothing. Do not wipe the vinegar off. Leave it alone. The liquid needs time to seep into the polymer structure and chemically react with the trapped odor molecules. This penetration and neutralization process takes between 30 and 60 minutes. Step 6. Let everything air dry with the doors open. In warm, dry weather, this takes 2 to 3 hours. In humid conditions, it might take 4 to 6 hours. Or you can speed it up with a portable fan aimed into the cabin. Yes, your car will smell like a salad for a few hours. But as the water evaporates, the vinegar smell dissipates completely, leaving behind nothing. No fragrance, no chemical residue, just clean, neutral air. For the floor mats you set outside, apply the same spray. Wait 60 minutes and let them dry in the sun before putting them back in. That is the entire process. Total cost of materials, roughly $2. Total active work time, about 5 minutes of spraying. Total waiting time, 2 to 6 hours of doing absolutely nothing while chemistry does the work for you. Part 5. The Polestar Lesson, where ancient wisdom meets modern danger. Now we come back to our Polestar owner, and this is where the survival lesson gets serious. Because the same molecule that just cleaned your car for $2 also destroyed his car for $29,000. The difference was concentration. His vinegar was 18% acetic acid, nearly 4 times stronger than household vinegar. At that concentration, acetic acid is aggressively corrosive to metals, wiring insulation, circuit boards, and rubber compounds. And in a modern electric vehicle, The space beneath the cargo floor is packed with sensitive electronics, high-voltage wiring, and brake system components, all routed through channels designed to be protected from water, but not from concentrated acid. This is the kind of distinction that separates useful knowledge from dangerous knowledge, and it applies far beyond car cleaning. So let me be very direct about what you must never do with vinegar in your car. Never spray vinegar on or near your vehicle's touchscreen, infotainment display, or electronic buttons. Acetic acid will degrade the anti-glare and oleophobic coatings, leaving the screen permanently cloudy. Never use vinegar on leather seats. Leather is processed animal skin that relies on essential oils to remain supple. Acetic acid strips those oils, causing the leather to dry out, stiffen, and crack over time. Use a dedicated pH-balanced leather cleaner instead, and always follow with a leather conditioner. Never apply vinegar to the rubber weather seals around your doors and windows. Over time, acid exposure degrades rubber, causing it to crack, lose flexibility, and fail to keep water out. And absolutely never use industrial-strength vinegar, anything above 5%, anywhere near a vehicle. Store it separately, transport it in sealed secondary containers, and treat it with the same respect you would give any corrosive chemical. 5% on synthetic fabric is a precision tool. 18% near electronics is a financial catastrophe. The molecule is the same. The difference is knowledge. Part 6. Knowing when the ancient remedy is not enough. There is one more layer of honesty we need to add here, because true expertise is not just knowing what works, it is knowing where a solution ends and another one begins. Vinegar is a surface-to-shallow chemical neutralizer. It is remarkably effective for what I call fixed event odors, smells from things that happened in the past and stopped. A previous owner who smoked, a coffee spill from last month, pet odor from a dog that rode in the car over the summer. For these situations, the $2 vinegar protocol is genuinely all you need. But vinegar cannot solve the source of an ongoing problem. If your car smells like a wet basement, you might have a leaking sunroof seal or a clogged AC condensate drain. The water is soaking the thick foam padding beneath your carpets. Spraying vinegar on top will neutralize the odor temporarily, but because the sponge underneath is still saturated, mildew will regrow within days. You have treated the symptom, not the cause. Heavy biological contamination is another limit. Pet urine or vomit that has soaked deep into seat foam, far beyond what a spray bottle can reach, requires professional extraction. And this is where the $200 to $400 professional detailer genuinely earns their fee. Professionals bring tools that DIY chemistry simply cannot replicate. Hot water extraction machines that blast heated water at high pressure to physically pull congealed biological matter out of deep foam. Bioenzymatic cleaners that contain living biological catalysts, enzymes that literally digest proteins, fats, and organic waste until nothing remains. And gaseous oxidation treatments using ozone or chlorine dioxide, toxic gases pumped into a sealed car that reach places no liquid can, inside air conditioning ducts, deep within the headliner, underneath the dashboard. Ozone, in particular, is a triatomic oxygen molecule that attacks carbon bonds at the molecular level, destroying smoke and mold compounds in places you cannot see or reach. Chlorine dioxide is even smaller, capable of penetrating the deepest pores of any material in the vehicle. These are powerful, dangerous tools. Breathing ozone can cause permanent lung damage. That is exactly why professionals charge what they charge, and why, in severe cases, they are worth every cent. The smart approach is to use each tool where it belongs. For everyday trapped odors in synthetic carpets and fabric, vinegar is your first and best weapon. For structural moisture problems, find and fix the leak first. For severe biological contamination, call a professional. Knowing which situation you are actually dealing with is the real skill. Conclusion: the knowledge that compounds. Here is what I want you to take away from today. We live surrounded by synthetic materials: our clothes, our furniture, our cars, our buildings. These materials brought us incredible convenience and durability, but they also introduced invisible problems, like microscopic voids that trap odors and toxins that our grandparents never had to deal with. Meanwhile, the market rewards products that create repeat purchases, not permanent solutions. So the simple, effective remedies that humans relied on for thousands of years, things like a 5% acetic acid solution, quietly disappear from our collective awareness. Not because someone suppressed them, but because nobody profits from telling you about them. What you gained today is more than a car cleaning trick. You gained a mental model. When you face any recurring household problem, start by asking, is there a simple, generic solution that nobody talks about because there is no money in it? More often than you might expect, the answer is yes. But equally important, you learned where the limits are. The Polestar owner story is a vivid reminder that chemistry is precise. The same molecule that cleans your carpet can corrode your brake lines. The difference between a miracle and a disaster is concentration, application, and respect for what you are working with. That balance, knowing what works and knowing exactly where it stops working, is the essence of the survival knowledge we explore on this channel. It is not about hacks or shortcuts. It is about understanding the world well enough to make better decisions every single day. Next time you get into your car and catch that stale, lingering ghost of an old smell, do not reach for the air freshener aisle. Reach into your kitchen cabinet. Use the same molecule that Babylonian merchants used to preserve their food 5,000 years ago. Write it with the precision of someone who understands both its power and its boundaries. And take control of your environment for about $2. If this changed how you think about the products you buy and the problems you solve, hit the like button. Share it with anyone who is tired of spending money on temporary fixes. And drop a comment below. Have you ever accidentally ruined something with a cleaning hack that seemed like a great idea? I want to hear those stories. Let us learn from each other. Until next time, keep questioning what you are sold, keep learning from the past, and stay sharp. This is Oracle Prime signing off.